Ian. Okay, welcome to the Poudre River Library District and the League of Women Voters ballot issue presentation for the Fort Collins City election that will be April 6th. First, I want to thank the Poudre River Public Library for hosting this, and especially to Ian Holmes, who has helped us set this up. And he is our tech person, but he's also the adult services librarian and adult learning coordinator. Okay, I also want to thank Pam Turner, who is on this with me. She is a League of Women voter, and she also volunteered for this position as helping me out to give this presentation. And I'm Judy Weaver from the League. Now, what will we cover today? Well, the city has 5 initiated proposed charter amendments, and we'll go over those, including the council referred ordinance regarding disposable bags and the council referred ordinance regarding Hughes Stadium property. I do want to point out that as normal, the League of Women Voters have put together our ballot issue pamphlets. Sorry, we couldn't hand them out to you at your home, but we do have places where they're available. They are available at the libraries, senior center, also Salud, the Northern Colorado Health District, and some of the other places in town. I can't remember at the moment. This is in Spanish and in English, and each of the Spanish is in a separate pamphlet, and English is in a separate one also. So when you pick one up, make sure you're picking up the right one. I will also talk a little bit about vote411.org, which is a League of Women Voters platform to get information on voting and voting issues. And I'll talk about how you can access that later. Now, I do want to point out before we start that the League of Women Voters of Larimer County is not responsible for the accuracy or the fairness of the arguments on either side. What we do is we ask the proponents and opponents to give us information on their stance. And so the pro and con statements are not our statements, they're actually from the proponents and opponents. Now, the League of Women Voters wants to make sure that you have all the information, so we will go over the pros and cons that we have received. And also, I want to point out that the League of the Women Voters is a nonpartisan and does not support any type of candidate. As Ian said, please put your questions in the chat, and we were going to go over 1 through 5 first, and then we'll have questions on those. Then we're going to go over the plastic ban issue and take questions and answer questions after that, and then do the Hughes Stadium last with questions, and then I'll finish up with some bits of information. Okay, city initiated proposed charter amendment number 1. Now, the key provisions of this are regarding the election of the mayor pro tem. The election of the mayor pro tem will occur at the same council meeting at which newly elected council members take their oath of office. If a vacancy occurs in the position of mayor pro tem, the council will, at its first regular or special meeting after the vacancy occurs, elect a new mayor pro tem to serve the rest of the vacated term. To give you a little bit of background on this, as of the April 2017 election, Fort Collins voters approved an ordinance that required newly elected city council members to take the oath of office at the first order of business at the first regular or special council meeting following the certification of the results and after the expiration of the recount period. Because of that change, the election of mayor pro tem might have to occur before the newly elected council members take office. This proposed charter amendment would address that issue by making the election of the mayor pro tem occur at the same council meeting at which the newly elected council members take their oath of office. The current city charter also does not address the process to elect a new mayor pro tem. If a council member in that role resigns as mayor pro tem, there is no way to actually initiate when how that would take place. So the proposed charter amendment will address the issue and define the process of electing a new mayor pro tem. Now, those in favor say this change will clarify the process for the election of the mayor pro tem, and the opposed, and actually there's no opposition at this point. So Pam, I'm going to let you go ahead with the next three.
Right, 2, 3, 4. So Amendment 2 has key provisions that propose to change the charter of the City of Fort Collins to remove existing prohibitions on campaign contributions and expenditures. And in place of that prohibition would require the council to establish by ordinance reasonable and appropriate prohibitions on campaign contributions and campaign expenditures. Also, to limit the amount any person or entity could contribute in support of a candidate for city council. And it also, the council would also then be required to determine disclosure and reporting of campaign contributions and campaign expenditures. So the background is that the city charter currently has limits on campaign contributions and expenditures and requires that city employees and among other things, city employees, political parties, and contractors to the city cannot contribute to city council elections. And this amendment would change that, would eliminate that restriction and require then that the city council put those restrictions back in to their own, we would entrust them to make a law that would require whatever the contributions would be and whatever the limitations would be. So over the past number of years, there have been changes that were made by ordinance by the city council, and this would require them to make more changes. So those in favor say that this opens up contributions to a broader group of people, and that it would allow council to consolidate the restrictions and requirements for campaign contributions and expenditures, and that it would allow new restrictions and requirements to reflect changes in federal and state laws that would apply. So those opposed say that election campaigns should be governed by city charter, not by city ordinance. In other words, be voted on by citizens. And that also that it increases political contributions from outside influence and may not be of interest to citizens. So there's no organized opposition to this charter. And I forgot to mention that. So that's Amendment 2. Amendment 3 is an amendment that clarifies that the city council can make additional appropriations from not only the actual and anticipated revenues, but from all other funds that the city receives during a fiscal year. And this amendment would also allow the city council to have the discretion to decide on a case-by-case basis when the funds would lapse for capital projects and for grants and donations. So in recent years, the city has received more and more private grants and donations. And this item clarifies that revenues may be appropriated when and how, so that the city council can do this and determine non-lapsing and continuance of donations, grants, as well as city revenues. So it basically just changes the description of revenues to include grants and contributions that the city is now receiving. There's no opposition to this charter amendment, and those in favor say that it would be helpful in some circumstances if the appropriation of funds for grants and donations be designated as non-lapsing and match the use of the funds with the donor's intent. So before I go to Amendment 4, I just want to say that it's interesting to go to the City of Fort Collins website and look at the actual text of these charter amendments. And it's actually much easier to understand than just reading the ballot language. And it gives a little more of a background of understanding. So I would encourage people to do that for all of the proposed charter amendments. So Charter Amendment 4, whose key provisions are proposed amendment increases in the time for the publication of a summary of an independent audit of the city's books and accounts to 7 months from 5 months. So it's a very straightforward amendment that just gives more time to review and audit the city books after the end of a fiscal year to 7 months. And the background is it was last updated in 1985. And since that time, the city budget and the completion of the independent financial audit has grown increasingly with the complexity of the city budget. So the requirement is that 5 months can be prohibitive. And the people in favor of the amendment say that the city staff's experience is that it's sometimes difficult to complete and it can be more expensive to rush through an audit in 5 months. So it's simply giving us a little more time. And there is no organization that opposes this that we have identified. So those are 2, 3, and 4, and we look forward to your questions. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Pam. I'll go over 5 next, Ian. The city-initiated proposed charter amendment number 5 is also very straightforward. The proposed amendment replaces a reference to municipal judge in section 5, describing the Board of Elections with chief judge. It's the only change. So a little bit of background. In 2017, the voters of Fort Collins approved an ordinance modifying the Board of Elections to establish a chief judge, where previously it was referenced as a municipal judge. The designation needs to be changed in Section 5 to avoid any confusion regarding the composition of the Board of Elections. And those in favor say the City Council wants to amend the charter to ensure clarity and internal consistency in these provisions. And there's no opposition. So now we'll go ahead and look at any questions that Ian has in the chat or Q&A for the first 5.
All right, we've got a number of questions here, and starting with Amendment 2. The first question is, won't the changes in Amendment 2 make it too easy for the City Council to make charter level changes that would be better made by voters?
That is one of the views that opposes the amendments. The City Council does make changes in the election provisions now, but can't change the specific ones that are outlined in the charter.
And I'd like to just add, I didn't say this at the beginning, but when we talk about charter amendments, all charter changes have to go through a vote, and that's why this is being voted on. And any ordinance change can be changed by the City Council. So from that standpoint, it will go from a charter to an ordinance.
Thank you, Judy. And there are some ordinances that are election issues that the City Council can change now and has changed. But this specific one has to do with who can contribute and how much. And so that's a very good point that the question made.
All right, and I've got another question about Amendment 2. If the council members will be creating their own campaign finance regulations through council-approved ordinances, what will be the checks and balances for council in this regard?
That is a good question, and I think that that is the main point here. What I've been told by the city clerk's office is that this is just a cleanup issue, and that the council can be trusted to make a reasonable decision on who can contribute and who can't. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure. I think it's a matter of opinion.
All right, thank you, Pam. And then we've got another question, this one about Amendment 3. Can you explain what non-lapsing means?
I think what it means, and it's clarified better than I clarified it. If you look at the actual wording on the city council, on this elections website. But what I think it means is that if someone contributes to something and the project doesn't get finished, and that money is still, by the end of a fiscal year, say, and that money is still in the city coffers, then you could say that they can use it for the next year until the project is completed. And that's my understanding of non-lapsing.
Excellent. Those are the questions I have for those first amendments. So.
Okay, we'll go on to the council referred ordinance regarding disposable bags. This is concerning plastic bags only. The large grocery stores would be prohibited from providing disposable plastic bags for bagging groceries at the point of sale, which is when you check out. Not included in this ban are any of the disposable bags that you use within the grocery stores, such as to put your vegetables and your fruit in, to wrap meat and fish in, or other internal uses. It also does not ban or prohibit the grocery store from selling plastic bags, such as dog waste bags, trash bags, or packaged food storage bags. Okay, it does affect paper bags also, because large grocery stores may not provide disposable paper bags at checkout unless they charge a fee of 12 cents each. Excuse me. Each of the fee, half of the fee will be retained by the grocery stores, and they'll be able to use that to offset their costs in this ordinance. And then the other half will go to the city to help defray their expenses. The paper bag fee will be waived for customers who present a benefit card for their participation in government assistance. So they will not have to pay any of the bag fees. They will be able to use paper bags free of charge. The city council, though, in the future would have the authority to expand the policy to include other types of businesses and other types of single-use plastics in the future. The city council and the city manager may suspend the collection and payment of disposable bag fees and other regulations under this proposal as deemed necessary due to public health emergencies or other unforeseen circumstances. Also, the proposal does not take effect until May 2022. Give you a little background about this. The City Climate Action Plan, called CAP, has a goal of reducing greenhouse gases and a road to zero waste by 2030 plan. The plastic, now just plastics, period, make up about 10% of the solid municipal waste that goes into our city landfill. City consumers use approximately 50 million disposable bags from large grocers each year. I'm going to take a drink here by just a second. Okay. Now, the city staff projects that this proposed ballot measure would reduce disposable plastic bags use by approximately 75%. And this is based on results achieved by a similar plastic ban in Palo Alto, California. Initial implementation of this program is estimated to cost about $87,500, And ongoing costs are intended to be covered by the bag fee of 12 cents each bag. Now, in August 2014, the City Council passed an amended ordinance requiring retailers within the city to charge customers 5 cents for each disposable bag. Retailers had to make sure that the customers understood that they were being charged this 5 cents in order to purchase and had to purchase the bag. The amendment met with major community opposition. A key objection was that it was applied to all retailers, no matter what size or what they sold, and this included nonprofits. Now, given this opposition, the City Council discontinued the effort. Unlike the 2014 amendment, the 2021 proposed ballot issue applies only to large grocers rather than all retailers. So, and I want to tell you that large grocers are those that are considered to have 10,000 or more square foot of space that's devoted to food, mostly for human consumption. Okay. Those in favor say plastic pollution is a priority concern at local, state, national, and international levels. We need to lower our usage of plastic and reduce the source of solid waste. Passage of this ballot issue furthers the city's climate action plan and the Road to Zero Waste by 2030 plan. Also, passage furthers the city's strategic objective, to sustain and improve the health of Poudre River and all the watersheds within the city. Now, the disposable bag fee is reasonable. That's what proponents say. Large grocers use half of the fee to cover their costs, and the city uses half to help ally its costs. An exemption is made to recipients of certain federal, state, county, and city income qualified programs. Now, although the Colorado General Assembly may consider a statewide ban on plastics this year, details of any such proposal are not yet known and passage is unknown. Those who oppose say plastic bags make up a relatively small percentage of municipal waste stream. The proposed ban imposes an unequal burden on some groups. For example, those people with disabilities and those who lack transportation options will be unduly burdened by this ban. The proposed ban is inconvenient for consumers. It places a financial burden on consumers as well as an administrative burden on large grocery stores. The Colorado General Assembly is preparing to consider a statewide ban this year, and so Fort Collins should wait to see what the state of Colorado does. So are there any questions? Ian?
Yeah, we've got a number of questions here.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with, does this require customers to bring their own bags if they don't want to pay the 12 cents per paper bag?
Yes, if they don't want to pay the 12 cents, they would have to have their own bags. A lot of people do that now, I think, although probably all of us have to use plastic once in a while. So you won't have plastic available, but you can get a paper bag.
And then is part of the problem made worse by grocers overusing plastic bags? For example, one bag for just a loaf of bread.
Oh, I think that's something I'm not going to comment on because I think that's not that is an information that I guess people could take their own thoughts on that.
And will the city's proportion of income from plastic bag charges be earmarked to support climate action initiatives?
No, I think, well, I didn't look at the whole proposal. Well, the proposal says here it will be ally costs with this particular program. So I think it will depend on how much money comes in. There's nothing other mentioned other than just the cost of the program.
And then how would grocery stores be able to accommodate curbside pickup, which requires many bags? Are there exceptions for accessibility?
There are no exceptions for accessibility that I read about. That is, they would have to use paper bags, I would think, and people would have to then pay for the paper bags that their food is bagged in? Those are good questions. I'm glad they thought of those. Those are actually good questions.
And then what does the plastic bag fee fund besides paying for the ban?
I'm sure there's going to be some coordination done at the city level. They will have to collect the fees from the grocery stores, just whatever is needed to implement the whole process. So we'll probably pay part of a salary. The first 87.5 probably for the initial setup and then they're hoping that the cost of what's given to them, the 6 cents per bag, will defray all the other costs.
All right. And then with disposable bags, how are dog waste bags to be treated? And what about bags from warehouse style stores like Target, where folks buy a mix of groceries and general merchandise items?
Okay. That's a good question. Now, the bags that you can buy inside the grocery store for dog waste are still going to be available. You will not have available the other plastic bags that you would have gotten at checkout. Those will not be available at all. So you'll have to have your own plastic bag that you buy in the grocery store. And I think the second part of the question, which refers to places like Sam's and others that are in the city, if they are large enough and they have 10,000 square feet or more devoted to food for human consumption, actually, that is an interesting situation, because actually Sam's does not have bags, period. They have boxes. If you go in, you don't come out with a bag for your groceries. You're either carrying it or in your arms, or you have a box. Was there another part to that question?
How about Target?
Yes, Target, where you would have, again, you would not be able to get plastic bags for grocery use. There is no information here. They're just looking at looking at food, plastic bags for food. So if you get plastic bags for your other items, it doesn't apply. You're looking only at groceries.
And then what is the rationale for the exemption of certain people?
Oh, the people that, okay, those on food stamps and need other assistance with buying their food, thinking that the 12 cents would be an additional burden for each bag. So this is trying to alleviate that burden of having to pay for a bag. They do not have to pay for a bag.
And then why is the bag fee so high at 12 cents? Most other locales that have enacted plastic bag bans impose bag fees of around 7 to 10 cents.
Okay. I cannot comment on that because that amount was fixed, must have been gone through a process of seeing how much they would need to cover in costs. I do not know the answer to that. What is the rationale for 12 cents?
And then will people who reuse their bags now have to buy plastic bags for home garbage?
Yes. They will not have any plastic bags available at checkout that you could reuse. So any type of bag that you want to use for garbage, you will have to buy, yes.
Excellent. And that's what I've got for the plastic bag proposal.
Okay, thank you. Yes, there's a good point in there from Sarah Pitts, who's a league member. Plastic bag prohibition is limited to large grocers. So again, we're talking about other things, just grocers. Okay, go ahead, Pam.
Thanks, Judy. So this is the initiative that I'm going to present that approves a citizen-initiated proposal in which the city of Fort Collins would be required to immediately rezone the 164.56 acre parcel of land, the property that was formerly the site of Colorado State University's Hughes Stadium, from transitional district to public open lands district. So I think it is, I think it's good to read what the proposal says. And I'd like to do that if I can find it here, because I think it's, it says, shall the city enact an ordinance requiring the city council of the city of Fort Collins to immediately rezone upon passage of the ordinance a 164.56 acre parcel of real property formerly home to the Hughes Stadium from the transition district to the public open lands district, and requiring the city to acquire the property at fair market value. So that's the full text of the ordinance. And as you all know, it has quite a history. But what public open lands means is that it would allow that property to be used only for parks, recreation, open lands, natural areas, and wildlife rescue and restoration centers. So the current transition district zoning allows development of the property for housing and other business purposes. So that would no longer be allowed. The city would be required to acquire the property at fair market value from Colorado State University, and the city would be prohibited from de-annexing, ceasing acquisition efforts, or subsequently rezoning the property without voter approval in a separate ballot initiative. In the event of the city non-compliance, the proposal grants legal standing to any registered city voter to seek legal relief, injunctive and or declaratory judgment. So the background, as we know, is that the Hughes Stadium property is at the base of the foothills west of Fort Collins, off Overland Trail near Bella Vita and the Ponds subdivisions, and is between the current Maxwell Natural Area and Pine Ridge Natural Area. It was the site of the CSU football stadium and event parking for that stadium for 50 years and was annexed by the city in 2018. CSU closed the stadium in November 2016 and demolished it in April 2018. There has been significant citywide discussion about best uses of the property, such as preservation of open space, residential development, etc. A citizens action group called PATHS, Planning Action to Transform Hughes Sustainability, held many public meetings to discuss rezoning the property for open lands use and put this measure on the ballot with 8,300 signatures. So those in favor say that the acquisition of the Hughes Stadium property and conversion into a public open lands area would build upon the city's significant history of preserving open spaces and would provide an invaluable social, economic, and environmental resource for current and future generations of Fort Collins residents. This ballot issue gives Fort Collins voters an opportunity to join together to show how greatly they value public open lands in our community. They also say that without the acquisition and conservation efforts, required by this proposal, the environmental resource potential of the property will be lost. The tract would be used for residential and/or commercial development. Those opposed, and there is no specific group that's opposed as there is in favor of this initiative, but those opposed say that CSU has stated their current residential development plan for the site, and it is designed to address local need for affordable housing and will benefit the environment by including solar and water saving technology options for new homes. And offer the West Side Transit Center to reduce car commuting from that western side of town. Their plan calls for 70 acres of open and green space, and the development would integrate into existing bike and pedestrian trail systems. So before we take questions on that, I'd like to say that to get more information on this, the Fort Collins Coloradoan actually has a good timeline on the history of what has happened since CSU decided to move the stadium, et cetera. So at this point, we'll take questions if there are any, Ian.
Excellent. So first off, is there a source of funding in this time of scarce municipal resources for purchase that has been identified?
Yes, I believe the city has made a good faith offer to CSU already for the property. So there must be if the city has already made an offer.
And then is the current zoning a temporary zoning? Even if this isn't approved, doesn't the zoning of the property still need to be determined?
No, the zoning has been determined, I believe, by City Council to transition district, and I think that the proposal by CSU takes into account that zoning.
And then with the rising cost of new home construction, what guarantees does CSU/Lennar have in place that their affordable, attainable plan would come to fruition? In other words, how are CSU/Lennar able to build outside of the pricing constraints that the entire home building industry faces?
Well, from my understanding, there is no requirement for affordable housing in our city land use code, but there is incentive for developers to build affordable housing. And that incentive is that if they build X amount of affordable housing, they're allowed to make the development more dense. And I'm not sure what those percentages are, but.
And then what is the fair market value of the property?
I think that remains to be seen because things have changed with CSU, so that it sounds like the last proposal that I saw from CSU said that they were originally selling it for $10 million. I think the city offered $7 million now that I'm thinking about it. So please strike my answer. I believe the city offered $7 million. So CSU, I believe, had an agreement with the home builder to sell the property for $10 million. And then more recently, they have some other kind of contract for an additional $4 million because they would be part of the development team, if that's a good way to put it. And I hope I'm answering that correctly.
Then we've got a question for clarification. Did you say that transition zoning allows for development?
Yes.
And then how will CSU manage prices of housing after they sell it?
There's no way that they can manage prices of housing after they sell it. But I would say that the developer has to go through a process with the Planning and Zoning Board and City Council to approve whatever the development is.
And then will the CSU development allow for public access to the open space on the private development?
I don't know that.
And then can CSU decide to do what it wants because it owns the land, especially since they will make more of a profit by building housing?
I'm sorry, Ian, would you repeat that?
Yeah. Can CSU decide to do what it wants because it owns the land?
I don't think CSU can do what it wants. I don't exactly know what that means, but I do think that if someone owns property, they can make decisions about what they'll do with it. But you know what? I think I forgot to talk about the opposition, one other issue for the opposition, which is that someone opposed said that it would cost the city to develop it as open space, so that would be an additional cost. And I think I forgot to say that, Ian. I'm sorry I did that. But I remember now that that was something that opponents have said. So yes, CSU owns the property, but no one can do exactly what they want with the property outside of whatever the zoning restrictions are.
And thanks y'all for your patience. We've got a lot of questions here. Is there an open spaces now tax of 0.25% to acquire lands?
Did that tax expire? I'm not sure if it did. I don't know the answer to that, Ian.
And then we've got the CSU plan has claimed 70 acres of open space. Part of that number includes the detention area being used as a disc golf course, which is under city control, not a discretionary set aside by the CSU redevelopment plan. It also includes acreage that cannot be built upon because of remaining underground structure of the stadium. What number of acres in addition to these is being set aside by CSU?
I don't think that we've seen the most current proposal by CSU, and I don't know the answer to that.
Will there be deed restrictions on the affordable housing units?
What does that mean?
Alas, that's all I have.
Meaning that I think what that they're saying is, can you buy an affordable housing unit and then sell it for a larger amount? Something like that. I don't think we're ready to say that because we don't even know what the affordable housing units are.
And in the current contract with Lennar, do they specify anything about affordable housing?
I don't know that.
And then a proposal has been circulated by an Indigenous resident that the land be made available for use by the Indigenous community. Could that be a possibility under the proposed new zoning category?
You mean the open lands category? I'm not sure I'm not sure how that would apply, but I believe that anyone would have access to it. Any public citizen would have access to public open lands, Indigenous or not.
If this measure goes in favor of being developed, what assurances are there that they have to adhere to the current plan versus change the plan and build high density and minimize open space?
Well, any plan has to be approved. So I don't know that the plan could be changed after it was approved by City Council and Planning and Zoning.
And how can the city review limit prices?
It can't.
Would the zoning change to open area affect the market value?
Meaning, I think what this person is asking is if it were open space, it wouldn't be as valuable, or maybe it would be more valuable. But if the city owned it and was using it as open space, I don't know why that would be an issue.
And the ballot issue doesn't talk at all about making a park, merely to refrain from development. Isn't a comment about additional park costs unfair?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's unfair, but until a proposal is made, we don't know the cost. We can know the cost of purchasing the land, but until the city then makes a plan for it, we don't know what the cost will be.
And how does the Northern Colorado Wildlife Center fit into the plan for the Hughes open space?
I don't know that. I've only read that it's a proposal. So I'm not sure why it's, I'm not sure.
How can CSU, as a public university funded by citizen taxes, justify selling to private developers to sell to private entities? My understanding is this public university's land is supposed to be used for public purposes.
Okay, I'm going to kind of interrupt here for a minute before we go on with the other questions, because I think we're talking a lot about CSU and what they're going to do with the land. And that really is going beyond the scope of this particular ordinance. We're only looking at saying yes or no to the city of Fort Collins would be required to rezone 164.56 acre parcel of land, formerly the site of the Colorado State University Hughes Stadium, from transition district to the public open lands district designation. A public owned open land district would allow use for only parks, recreation and open lands, and wildlife rescue and restoration centers on the parcel. So I know this is more narrow because we've all thought of this, what about CSU and all this? The city will be required to actually put in a bid that would be fair market value. We can go from there. So I think we're kind of jumping ahead here and thinking about what CSU is going to do, because first of all, we have to find out what the citizens of Fort Collins want. Do they want this to be designated as open lands? And if we vote yes, then the other parts of the proposal would go into effect. If we vote no, then the whole gist of what CSU will do with it or can do it comes into play. And of course, I think, as Pam knows, she knows more about zoning than I do. But if CSU, then will have to go before the zoning board to decide if CSU keeps it. If it's still in CSU's hands, what happens? Does that make sense to you, Pam?
Yes, Judy, I think that's a good way to put it, that we do need to narrow our focus of the questions. And I think many questions that people have about this, the use of this land, are not known because we don't know if the zoning is going to change. But so what we can focus on is, do we want to change the zoning and then go forward from there? And if we don't, that's a whole different path. But I understand people's concern about both of the things, both affordable housing and how we can use that land for people, and more open space and how we can use that land for people. So I think I appreciate your limiting the scope, and I appreciate that. I think that's correct.
Yeah, and I appreciate everyone's discourse. We've got a lot of comments and questions here, so bear with me as we kind of work through all of these. I'm going to do my best to sort of filter some of the ones away from the intentions of CSU and more toward the issue itself.
And we have about 10 more minutes, so Ian, so I think if we have a few minutes at the end for Judy to wrap up, that would be good.
Absolutely. And, we've got the contacts and the information for the League of Women Voters. I'll repost those in the chat as well. So if you'd like to ask follow-up questions, you can contact them directly through there. So I'll just do a few more questions here, and then we can move forward. So if the land was given to CSU by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Reclamation, is CSU bound to keep any profit from selling the land in the public domain?
Say that again. If the Bureau of Reclamation gave the land to CSU, then what?
Is CSU bound to keep any profit from selling land in the public domain?
I think you're asking to, can CSU keep the profit? And CSU is part of the public domain. Is it not a public university? So yes,
All right. And then who has the right to zone land within the city limits?
The zoning process goes through the Planning and Zoning Board, but as a suggestion, and then must be approved by City Council, as far as I understand it.
And then is zoning as an open space permanent, or can it be rezoned later?
According to the provision in the amendment, or in the in the ordinance, the city would be prohibited from de-annexing, ceasing acquisition efforts, or subsequently rezoning the property without voter approval. So yes, it could be zoned with rezoned with voter approval from another provision that we vote on later. But also let me say that the city has a plan for zoning that lays out large areas and specific areas for certain kinds of zoning. So, to the question that who can zone.
Let's see. So I think I'm gonna extend the offer to everyone to again reach out to the League of Women Voters after the presentation with more questions, as it's getting a little unwieldy here. So I'm going to throw it back to Pam and Judy.
Can I also say that it would be very helpful for everyone to go to the city elections website and actually read the provision itself and go from there. It's very instructively laid out for people to read. And yeah, thank you for putting that in the chat, Ian, so everyone can go to that website.
Great. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay. We'll go a couple things that I want to say in closing. Your ballots are going to be mailed by March 22nd, and you should receive them no later than March 31st. If you haven't received them, please go check with the city clerk, and you can call there, and I do have a number, 970-221-6515. But I think you could also just look on the website for the city clerk's office, and then you can call and tell them you didn't get your ballot. You also can check your registration on the city under their elections information, and you could go to the county to check to find out if you're registered, or if you want to make sure you get a ballot is the whole point. Now, we did say at the beginning the presentation is being recorded, and this will be available on YouTube at the Poudre River Library site, or I'm not quite sure how to say that. I'm not a YouTube user, I'm sorry. And there also will be a link on the League of Women Voters of Larimer County website page will have a link to the recording. I want to point out too about vote411.org. We talked about a little bit earlier, and that is the League of Women Voters website. It's national. And you can go in and get the same information that was on the pamphlets in English and in Spanish, as well as get information about the mayor and who's running, and also candidates, the council candidates. Not everybody has a council candidate that they will be voting on. It depends upon where you live. So you do have to put in your address. So we'll come up with Fort Collins information. You don't want Colorado Springs information or any place else. Excuse me. So put in your address, and it will come up with only the people that are on your ballot and with these ballot issues. And let me see. Oh, you can tune in tonight on Fort Collins Channel 14 or 881 to find out about the mayor candidates and city council candidates. There will be a public forum. This will be streamed later, and you can also get it. The city's going to tape it, and we'll have a link on our League of Women Voters website. Thank you so much for coming and being involved. Thank you, Pat.
One more thing, Judy, I saw in the chat, and I think this is worth mentioning, that yes, the citizens of the city of Fort Collins can rezone, and that's what they're doing with this initiative. So it's not only the city council, but it's also the citizens. So I wanted to make that point and make sure that people were aware of that, because that's what this provision is. So thank you so much for helping to govern the questions and organize the whole discussion.
Thank you. Be sure and vote.